Hello, we are F.
A. P.
My name is Farhan, student number 20/454618/SP/29336.
I'm Azel, student number 20/454/620/SP/29338.
And my name is Prima, student number 20/454638/ASP29356.
Welcome to our podcast entitled The Whiplash of Cancel Culture, a conversation on corporate economic interest. This podcast was made to fulfill the final examination assignment of our international communication course. So, Mbak Lisa and Mbak Mutia, our lecturers, we hope both of you will enjoy this podcast. So, what are we going to be talking about, Farhan?
Well, this might be a super impassioned discussion, but we're going to be talking about cancel culture, specifically in the line and context of corporate interests and how they tie heavily into the tides and trends that the culture brings. But what exactly is cancel culture, right? How do we ascertain ostracized figures as a product of their own mistakes in any social or professional place? And how do we figure out which are thrusted out because of mob mentality and cancel culture?
Well, Farhan is actually a term so easily thrown about what we think is often reductionist to just chalk the idea up into canceling figures out of their social life based on their past offenses. As boilerplate as it gets, cancel culture is a matter of how people deal with the consequences of their actions. For public figures, this extends to the cyberspace where internet discourse unravels and decides the tides of the trend when it comes to public perception.
I also want to bring another point to the table regarding what exactly our podcast is supposed to signify. So, our number one culminating point of discussion in this case is the idea that certain corporations are always keen and on the move with set tides. They take notice of what's beneficial and serves their interest. And so, if stakeholder associations with public figures cannot be feasible due to the tides of cancel culture, organizational decisions to also thrust said figures out of their professional circle could take place.
Now, in order to lend credence to our own discussion, we've got a couple of raunchy case studies for all you keen listeners today, which will discuss the wide berth of complex issues within the culture. And we'll start by going in depth to the catalyst that actually inspired this podcast, and it's that of Dave Chappelle's online controversy. Basically, after his stand-up Netflix special, The Closer, in which Chappelle chucked out a couple snide comments and remarks about the transgender and LGBT community, a raucous controversy came to form on Twitter, in which efforts to cancel and boycott his products came about. Now, chief to this case is how, in the aftermath, film festivals and corporations choose to not greenlight and also distribute Chappelle's newest projects, so as to avoid controversy in the name of choosing to not associate with figures whose values are not aligned with the corporations. And Chappelle also made the case of how mentioning that this was in part not because of the misalignment in values, but because cancel culture made it a point to show that Chappelle's products are now to be boycotted and consequently detrimental to the profits of any film company championing his name.
However, our dear listeners, what makes this discussion interesting is that we found this other occurrence in the past that can be an intriguing comparison towards the Dave Chappelle situation. So Chris Brown, also another infamous person in Western entertainment industry, well, I think his controversy was very well known if you were on Twitter back in 2010. So around the end of that year, Chris Brown tweeted several homophobic slurs in response to a rapper named Ross, who called him out first for his abuse towards Rihanna back in 2009. So, mind you, these are two separated events, but well, yeah, all of this showed how problematic and deserves to be cancelled Chris Brown was, right?
But he didn't get away with all of that, right?
Yeah, right?
No, actually, Chris Brown indeed did not get away with the abuse. He got charged with battery and completed his probation in 2015. But that's not it, Based on the timeline made by Rolling Stone in 2016, Chris Brown later had several following assault accusations and cases in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2015, and 2016. The sad thing is that this guy is still out and about. Even back in 2019, his song featuring Drake entitled No Guidance from his album Indigo got nominated for Grammy Best R&B Song. Like, come on, right? After all of those accusations and cases, how are there still music labels who want to support him? And why did the renowned Recording Academy even consider him as a nominee? I mean, if you're looking at it this way, it sounds so wrong, but The thing is, the Grammy nomination was in 2019, right? So it was 10 years after his assault towards Rihanna and 9 years after his homophobic Twitter rage. So I guess the public just forget, and thus the corporations do not have any obligation to call off Chris Brown anymore. I mean, maybe they thought, if we can make money off of him, why do we need to remind the public of what he has done, right? But what do you think though, Farhan? What about the corporation aspect of the Dave Chappelle's case? Do you find any similar situation in which the corporations side with profit?
Absolutely, Azel. I just think that the idea, at least in the Dave Chappelle case, how film festivals established in that instant that any association with Dave Chappelle might infer a risk of profit loss if followed through would give us the idea that the very entity behind these corporations seeks to follow the tide of the culture as opposed to like currently meeting company valued expectations. And so with these cases in mind, I think the question remains, and it's that how do we make the necessary changes to understand how corporations will react to cancel culture, and in which instances can we boil these corporations into simply profit seeking in the realm of corporate economic interests, and which of them actually stand for their own virtues and rights. Now, to see such an outline, we're going to also begin a discussion on what we think are some of the parameters that decide the motions of corporate interests in cancel culture. In cases like Chris Brown's, the idea that record companies choose to employ Brown's name and talent after the controversy blows over in due time shows us that there is no attention to company values and missions, as long as the ability to break even and further revenues far outweighs the need to remain virtuous.
But yeah, I think the most important step to this is to understanding the lineage and history of said companies when dealing with problematic figures. And for example, you can look at the corporation like the Grammys who nominated Chris Brown and realize that from 10 years after the controversies were spilled out, no recent action has been taken despite all of the actual legal outings. And from this, we can know that this phenomenon has become a way for us to know if companies are staying true to their own values and ethics. And maybe in the future, we might also notice the pattern of the companies that hold onto their values and ethics or not.
So true, but coming back to the Dave Chappelle situation though, well, obviously his transphobia comments and jokes in his latest Netflix special went viral, right? And we all know what follows after anything controversial went viral on social media. Cancel culture. There were obviously some people who still defended Chappelle, but the ones who cancelled him were immeasurable, especially from the LGBTQ community. There were even a walkout and protest done by the Netflix employees themselves due to the Dave Chappelle situation. And this number of cancellation became a trend that the corporations were noticing, right? So let's remember that these corporations are here for profit. And the cancel culture is vital for profit because cancel culture highly influences corporations' decision-making process. And the explanation is by following the trend of cancel culture, as in not supporting the currently cancelled figure, a corporation will be able to make quote-unquote the right decision. And that is why, based on the report by The Hill, film festival companies and distributors who initially supported Dave Chappelle's special immediately called off their support once he got virally cancelled. However, when the cancellation is over, when the public forgot, well, the corporates will go back making money off of that used to be cancelled figures. And the real example is the Chris Brown situation. So sadly, these are real evidence that these corporations do not really care for the marginalized communities for good, but only when it profits them.
I'm sorry. So anyway, talking about cancel culture, I actually found like two theories about cancel culture related to crowd control theories, and actually I know that crowd control theories actually revolves around a situation in which people are managed so they wouldn't create such mass in the crowds or such violent actions in the crowds, right? And actually I found two theories, which are contagion theory and the other one is converge theory. And the first one is contagion theory. It's founded by a French psychologist named Gustave Le Bon, and he explained that crowds influences people to act in a certain way in which crowd wildness is somehow contagious internally. So it's just like coronavirus, it's contagious. Like for example, I will give a world example. Like for example, there is a trending in Twitter right now where people just cancel a public figure and seeing the trending on that thing, everybody else is doing so. In other words, trending behavior is also contagious. And the other theory is called converge theory, which explains that when a critical mass of individuals with the same goal and desire come together, collective actions occur almost intentionally. And that's why within these theoretical frameworks, corporations in the future might as well as to somehow manipulate cyberspace crowds to create, let's say, canceling someone to benefit their economic interests. And that's just dangerous. And somehow I would love to see cancel culture to be more stabilized in the future for us to be able to establish better moral in this world.
I absolutely agree, Prim. I think conclusively, this is a culture that's going to subsist within the years and decades to come. And if online communities do not learn how to harness such a culture in the face of corporations and entities looking to gain and take advantage of it, then I do think that the same cycles of repeated redundancy of cancel culture will occur once more. But that being said, we'd also like to point out that none of us are advocating for and siding with Dave Chappelle and or Chris Brown, and nor are we transphobes and supporters of domestic violence or the sort, right?
That's very true, Farhan. Plus, my dearest listeners, we need to remember always that the actual victim of this situation are the marginal communities whose voices are being misused for the corporate economic interest.
I cannot agree more with you guys, but actually we should end this discussion because we almost ran out of our time. And anyway, thank you everyone for listening to our very first podcast. I hope we gave you many insights regarding cancel culture, and perhaps maybe you guys have an opinion in mind. If you do so, please write down in the comment section below, and thank you and stay curious.
Bye-bye!
Bye!
F-A